Hello and welcome back to the Behind the Fic podcast. I'm Fate and you are listening to the Behind the Fic podcast. I've said it twice now. A podcast where we interview fanfiction writers and we talk about their process, and it's really cool. And today my co-host is Obsidian, who you've met before,
Oh,
and who is my guest today.
It is me, No One's Home 12. I, yeah, I wrote what we're working on now, like 2 years ago. Um, a year ago. Can you tell I've never done this before? But yeah, currently working on a longer fic, Silent Ranger and the Curious Princess. You may have heard of it, you may have not, but who knows? And I think I've gone on for too long, so
No, go please.
no, I think that's good enough
Okay.
for them to.
So, your fic, best friends was posted in 2020, so that was a year ago. I
Yeah,
know time doesn't exist anymore.
yeah,
it
no.
really doesn't. I forget what day of the week it is half the time.
Yeah. No, I was making plans with my friend the other day, and I was like, yeah, I won't be there until so and so because my mom has work that day. It's a Saturday. I thought it was a Friday. Oh
I
my
woke
god.
up on
Okay.
Tuesday thinking it was Sunday, so
Oh. Okay. Anyway, so the fic that we're covering today is best friends ? And I don't think it has any trigger warnings. There's a little bit of like insecurity on Zelda's part, but that's basically it. It's a really nice, sweet, kind of flowy, but kind of angsty. It's just kind of like a nice, it's simple. I don't know if
That's my
that's not a bad thing. It's just
no,
like,
yeah, that's my trademark. It's
yeah,
sad and fluffy at the same time.
yeah.
It's what I
And
strive for.
it was the perfect
the
blend of the two. It
I
didn't
always
really go
read your
one way or
name
the
as
other.
no one show me. It's no one's home. Every single time. No one's home is going to read the fic, so whenever you're ready, take it away.
All right. All right, and I mentioned this before we started recording, but it's been a while since I've read anything out loud, so bear with me. All right. She was warm. She almost scoffed at her one-word description. She grew up in a castle with the kingdom's smartest tutors and prided herself on being a scientist. Surely there were more sophisticated words than warm, but she just couldn't find another word that perfectly described what she was feeling. Lying down in the grass with the sun high in the sky and the wind blowing her short hair. Even though it had been a few weeks since she cut it, she still wasn't entirely used to the change. Instead of waking up earlier than she would have liked to go down to the river, to wash it, dry it, and then brush it, now all she had to do was brush it, and she was done. Although she missed the brushing a little bit. Not because she particularly enjoyed it, but because some nights her friend would offer to do it for her, and she could never refuse him. Friend. This time she almost scoffed at the description. This time she actually scoffed at the description of him. Friend was hardly an accurate word to use. It probably was not even in the first 5 words she would think of to describe him. Protector, hero, glutton, lover. She blushed at the last one, but she couldn't help herself. Even with his limited memory, he still felt connected to her, so they were inseparable after their reunion, much to Impa's frustration. Impa. Just thinking of the Sheikah elder made her stomach tighten. It wasn't the elder's fault. Well, mostly it wasn't. It was what she stood for, the old way, restoration, coronation, and all of it. After a few months of rest and relaxation, or as much relaxation as she could get with her friend, Impa finally sat her down and discussed their next step. That gave her pause, mainly due to the fact that she had no idea what she wanted to do next. When spending over a century locking away the literal incarnation of hate and death, her main focus on was keeping it locked away for another day, month, year, or decade. So she told Impa exactly that. She didn't know what she wanted. This made the elder start to suggest what she should do next. Restore her family's kingdom, sit on her throne, and rule. Impa saw the hesitation in the girl's eyes and reminded her of who she was. Zelda. the last surviving member of the royal family that had ruled over this land for centuries, and the goddess incarnate who held back the world's end for over 100 years. None of this was lost on her. She knew what her name meant and what she could do with it, but since her victory over the calamities, she had traveled all over Hyrule with her friend, and saw what became of her home in her century-long absence. She saw the destruction and decay bustling with life. She saw how empty and isolated the wild was, almost like nature was taking back what was rightfully theirs. There had been days where they hadn't seen a single person, not a traveling merchant or a patrol of knights to keep the roads safe from monsters, which they no longer were. She had seen all of the terrible things that happened to her kingdom over the last century. However, that wasn't all she saw. She saw plant life and animals that were endangered or near extinct a century ago, along with new settlements that had not existed years prior. Settlements like Ateno or Tarrytown. Sure, Ateno had existed before, but was only a few farms in close proximity. Nothing like the thriving town it was today. Tarrytown was a whole other story. Before the calamity, the different races of Hyrule rarely interacted with one another, save from diplomatic or economic reasons, and even more rarely lived in the same settlement as one another. Tarrytown was exactly what she wanted Hyrule to be, and is everything that it will be. Hopefully another calamity doesn't murder everyone again. It was the positive things that she saw that gave her doubt that the kingdom even needed to be restored. People had been living without her or her family for over 100 years, and she doubted that they would give up their independence just to bend the knee to some girl that they had never met before. And she told Impa as much, to which the elder replied, "The people of Hyrule have been living without you, Zelda. Haven't been living without you, Zelda. They've been surviving, and that is not living." Those words have been ringing in her head ever since she heard them this morning, which is why she needed a quiet place to think. To think of how to ignore her thoughts and responsibilities, to which she was failing miserably. She got off to a good start by trying to describe how she felt, which led to her hair, which led to her friend, which led back to the very thing she was trying to avoid. Goddess, I swear I have the mental focus of a 5-year-old child, she thought to herself, as she got up and sat by on a nearby log. The cliff she was currently on overlooked Hyrule Field, the intimidating shadow of her former home and century-long prison impossible to ignore. It seemed she was incapable of avoiding her own thoughts. Impa told me I would find you out here. An all too familiar voice broke her from her musings. Link. She gave him a small smile before looking back at her former home. So her friend finally found her secret hiding spot. She knew that he would have found her sooner or later. He sat next to her, leaving some space between them. He knew that when she got into her head, she needed some space until she was able to put her thoughts into words. You think I still have a purpose? Like, am I needed? She would ask without taking her eyes off the castle. I think you should ask someone who isn't biased. Maybe ask Purr that. She wasn't looking at him, but she could practically hear the smile. She could practically see the smile on his face. I don't want her opinion. I want yours, bias and all. She heard him sigh as he moved closer to her on the log. Of course you still have a purpose, and I need you. She tried not to blush, but she needs to really think about this without letting her feelings get in the way. I meant to Hyrule. Do I really have a purpose even if I choose not to be queen? And even if I choose to be queen, why would people even want me? They seem to be doing just fine without me, she asked. Well, I think so. You wanted to be a researcher just like Purr, right? That could be your new purpose, to discover new things, if you choose not to be. If you decide to, I can't speak for them, but if the people could really see how you could change their lives for the better, I believe they would gladly accept you as their queen. She knew that he was right. Well, half right at least. She always knew what she would do if she didn't become queen. She would live with Link in Ateno, get married, raise a family, all while doing what she loves, science. But the more and more she thought about it, she knew it was just a fantasy of another life. It was what people thought of her that concerned her the most. Why they should follow her. Why would they think she would better their lives in any way? It's just, why would anyone follow me? Fight and die for me? I'm just a girl who, raised a princess, has no experience of ruling or even knowledge on how to rule properly. After mother passed, father only focused on my power, nothing on how to properly follow in his footsteps. Link took this as an opportunity to close the distance between them and put his hand on her shoulder. While I can't speak for anyone else, when I see you, I see someone who sacrificed everything for her people, her family, her home, her life. Someone who spent a century keeping the calamity at bay. Someone who, even when all was lost, still fought and didn't give up. Someone who actually cares for the well-being of all races in Hyrule. Goddess knows we haven't had one of those in a long time. And when I see you, I see my best friend. She hadn't realized, but at some point during Link's diatribe, tears were starting to creep down her face. Zelda practically threw herself into his arms as he finished. This got a surprised yelp out of him as they fell off the back of the log, leaving her lying on top of him. She felt his arms wrap around her waist, and he whispered, "I mean it," into her ear. She snuggled into his chest, letting herself relax against him, until something he said made her look at him with a raised eyebrow. Best friend? Well, it was such a serious moment. And, I didn't want to assume anything, Link said, his ears reddening. She had to admit that she took immense pride in making the hero of Hyrule blush. Mm-hmm. Assume, eh? Well, why don't I make it so that you won't have to assume next time? Link wasn't able to reply as his lips were cut off by hers, arms tightening around her waist. She knew one thing. No matter what she decided, she was definitely keeping her friend with her the whole step of the way.
Unmute myself. Very good. You can't hear my
Yeah.
clapping. You can never hear my clapping, but very good. That was actually pretty good. You gave a disclaimer that you wouldn't be able to read that well, but that was pretty good.
Eh,
And the major, I can edit out the major pauses, so
alright,
don't worry.
I appreciate it. Some
Yeah.
of them were for dramatic effect, so.
All right. But I know there was a couple where it was
Oh yeah,
but,
absolutely.
yeah.
Some of them I stumbled, but
It's
whatever.
okay. Don't worry about it. It just makes you seem more human. I mess up all the time. If you've listened to this
You did
podcast
good.
before, yeah, you did really good.
Thank you.
And this might be a weird thing to say, and I don't want to offend you, but this is like the first time we've had a male sounding voice on our podcast.
Yeah, I talked to Sitting about this, at least in her server, where when I joined, I noticed I was the only, like, at least going off of the pronouns tags they got.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, I'll be they them, even though I wasn't. I was too, I don't know, I don't want to say ashamed or embarrassed to be the only guy there, if that makes sense.
I think it's kind of cool. Like I love all the girls, but it's like, okay, some new people.
Yeah,
Some
Yeah,
new
and then there's me.
there are a few more boys in there now.
Yeah, there are other
So
boys,
Yeah.
but it's really cool. Okay. So my first question is, I like that you left Zelda's decision open ended, but do you have a personal headcanon for what she decides?
Um, well, I wrote this before the new trailer came out. So I mean, I kind of, I wouldn't mind either or. Like, I remember when I first played the game, I'm like, okay, they're gonna remake the kingdom and all that. And then reading up everyone else's, where it's like, yeah, why would she want to do it? Doesn't really see a need for it, all that stuff. And I'm kind of in the middle now, where it's kind of like that story, Displaced, that series, where like
I've heard of
she
it.
doesn't want to be royalty, but she'll like form a council of all the races and try to rebuild it best they can. That's what
Right.
I think. That's my personal headcanon, at least.
That makes sense. Obsidian, do you have a question?
I do. Firstly, Fate, you always stick my questions. Because that was something that I was gonna ask too.
Oh no.
Um I don't well, I guess my question is if you did this on purpose or not, but when
Oh
I
boy.
was reading it and while I was listening to you read it just now, I kept noticing the back and forth between old and new. And I wanted to know if you had done that on purpose or if this was just something that happened.
Good question.
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I'm glad that you thought of that because I never thought of that. This was probably the second thing I wrote, like at like 1 in the morning,
Oh my
like
gosh, that's when all the good stuff happens. Is like at like
yeah,
1 in the morning.
That's a
yeah.
huge mood.
It's like at 1 in the morning. I I think this is the second thing I wrote, and I didn't I like gave it a once over and then posted it at 1 in the morning, and I'm just like, yeah, that's good. I didn't really think about it. To
Mhm.
answer your question, I honestly didn't really think about it. I had this all came all of my initial stories were all of during the when the quarantine was at a height and I was
Right.
going insane at home and I just drive around for like a couple hours and all these ideas were just like, what if this happened? What if that happened? All that stuff, and I'm like, I'll just write it, and this was one of them.
Yeah, that's
Well, I
completely
think that
my
just kind
process.
of says something about you as a writer, that you did a whole narrative, like, back and forth without even
Yeah.
meaning to. Like, you weren't, like, were you not aware that that was, like, something that had happened in that story until just now when I asked you about it?
Yeah, pretty much. Like,
Because, I
yeah,
mean, it's literally through the entire thing. So that's honestly impressive.
I'll I'll call it a fluke.
No, I mean, I
Uh,
guess it just gives credit to you that you got into Zelda's mental state so well that it's when I bet once the calamity is quotes over,
yeah,
she's always stuck between what is and what was. So you being able to implement that even accidentally just speaks to how well you captured her mindset. So
yeah. I
take
and
credit for it.
most of the stories. Thank you. And most of the stories I write, I do it from Link's perspective, mainly because I don't know. I don't know. I mean, well, he's a blank slate, so you can
Mhm.
basically do whatever you want with him. Um, I mean, I guess that's another reason why I like writing him, but I just like the stoic knight
Right.
trope. I'm a fan of that.
There's so much you can do with Link. I
Oh
agree.
yeah.
Okay, my next question. It's interesting to me that Zelda still feels inadequate and unwanted after unlocking her sealing power and saving Hyrule from the Wrath of Ganon for 100 years. But that's something that's in a lot of fix because she she's been through so much, and it's hard for her to find a place in this new Hyrule. What do you think will ultimately heal her insecurities?
Jesus.
Sorry.
So, um, honestly, I hmm, like,
Diving into the
hmm,
deep end today.
what would heal her anxiety? Ah,
I thought none of my questions were good. Apparently, this one was really deep.
no. Well, I'm awful at answering open-ended questions, so I mean, you could probably ask me a softball, and I'll feel like for 5 minutes. Um, it's 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 all on her having to forgive herself for what she thinks is her fault, whether it's through Link like sitting her down and talking to her about it, or like reading her father's journal that's saying it was pretty much all his fault. I think that would probably help because I think
There's a one
it's
star
not.
right there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's yeah. Um, yeah. Honestly, I don't know.
That's a really good
um,
answer. Forgiving herself. That's really cool though.
yeah. I don't know.
I've always
You're smarter than
honestly
you give
felt
yourself credit for.
Ah.
I've always felt conflicted about Zelda reading Rome's Diary, because I feel like that would kind of be traumatic for her.
Mm,
Oh yeah. Probably.
yeah, but Link's there to support her. Sorry, I'm it's a Link trash, just like you.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
Obsidian, what's your next question? If I haven't taken it already.
Um so my next question was about Impa. I I find it curious whenever people, because like in a lot of fics, there seems to be like this half and half regarding Impa, where sometimes she's like, you must become queen and, restore the kingdom and blah, blah, blah. And then sometimes she's just like, your purpose is, you've done what you were destined to do, and now you get to do what you want to do. And I'm curious, because you wrote this a year ago, if that perspective has changed or if it's still the same.
Um, I think it's still the same. Like, I've read some that where she's like, okay, now that Link did what he needed to do, he can just like screw off and not have to be around you anymore. And while I enjoy a good angst story like that every now and then, I I think I think we've talked about this before, where um, I kind of don't like where the stories where, okay, not that I don't like, I just don't agree with like the characterization in some stories where she's like, all right, you could do whatever you want now, because she's like, well, Zelda was trapped away in in limbo, and Link was asleep for 100 years. She lived that 100 years, living with seeing all of her friends and basically the world end. And she spent all those 100 years like thinking of the day when either they would lose or they would win. And if they won, the first thing I would think she would want to do is to at least, even if she's 100 years older, is to at least try and get some form of normalcy. At least, well, the post or calamity is probably the normal for her, but like try to at least go back to before where it wasn't as bad, and maybe have like, because people always I think Paya needs to be involved more, where Impa needs to be the supporting and caring grandma, where she's like, I want a better world for my granddaughter, and I don't like what's going on right now. Like, there needs to be some structure and all that stuff. If
Yeah.
that made sense. This
That
again,
does make sense.
I've never voiced any of this. This has all either been through text or in my head. So this is the first time I'm putting words to it. So it could just be rambling. So
No, that
I
makes
mean, it
sense.
makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah. Was that? Yeah, that was Obsidian's question. Okay, you were so smart that I lost my brain. So now that I guess this question is asking about your mindset while writing it, but also your mindset now. How soon or long after this fic do you think Breath of the Wild 2 takes place? Like where like I guess when you were writing it, where was it in your head, and then now where do you think it would be?
um, well, when I was writing it, I kind of just ignored that Breath of the Wild 2 was happening because, well, I mean, when the initial teaser trailer came out, it was like, okay, he's back, Ganon's back, so it's gonna be, they have to go through all of that again when they sacrifice so much. So I kind of just like ignored it. I just wanted them to be happy for once in their lives, which rarely happens in a lot of stories. But now, um, I'd like there to be some time between Breath of the Wild 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
Just like,
For them to rest? Yeah.
yeah, like, God, please, just let them rest, please. Or, because I know people are like split as to whether Link 100% remembers her or just remembers the memories that she
Right,
left
yeah.
for him. So I have a feeling, well, Nintendo's never going to give us anything. But I'd like there to be some time so that they can like interact more. They could have interacted with each other more than just like a couple weeks.
Right.
Yeah, because I said this, I think I mentioned it somewhere in this, where it was a couple months after the the end of Breath of the Wild 1. So I'd say probably like a couple more months.
Okay.
Until Breath of the Wild 2.
To
That
be
was a very
completely
long
fair,
way to
at the
answer
point
your
in time
question.
where you wrote this, we knew next to nothing about Breath of the
Yeah.
Wild 2, other
Still
than that
don't.
minute-and-a-half long trailer from 2019.
Oh, don't worry, we still don't. So
Yeah. We're just living on maybe 2 minutes of content now,
yeah,
pulling from each
it's like
frame.
4 minutes in total,
Yeah.
and only like 30
We're
seconds is
living
like.
on Fumes and Skyward Sword right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course.
It
Of
was a
course.
great time when it was just one trailer and maybe 60 seconds of content, and people were just making amazing things like art and fics. I'm just like, this is what we do with like a minute. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And now everyone's focused on how Zelda's in a hole and
Yeah.
Link's in the sky.
Yep.
Uh
The Skyward Sword parallels really are just on it.
Obsidian, do you have any more questions?
I do not.
I'm sorry, I stole one of your questions, so you only had two. Where's Tumblr? There it is. Okay. Here's the Tumblr submitted question, and all of us answer this. What do you try to convey most when writing? Do you focus on atmosphere or emotions or dialogue, etc.? And the first person to answer this will be our guest. No one's home. I try to not say no one show me.
It's alright. I'd probably say dialogue because because for me, I don't know what it is, but when I try to write detailed descriptions, for me when I reread it, I'm like, this is redundant. It's just saying the same thing again. Like I just don't think I'm that good at writing like description. Like I could do a basic description of something, but some writers are so amazing at like I could see it in my head.
Right, yeah.
Like it's really amazing. And with me, it's like the only reason I can like picture it in my head is because it's literally in my head is where I'm writing it from. And same kind of goes for atmosphere, where I don't really know how to set it up without it
Mm.
just being a description.
Yeah.
So I tend to just stick to dialogue, even though I don't think I'm the best at writing it. I feel like it's what I'm best at, and I try not to turn everything into like a sarcastic back and forth, even though that's like my default thing to try and write. Because when I feel like whenever I try to write like someone, like two people having a emotional heart to heart, I'm like, is this does this sound realistic? Is it not too corny? Like, is it not just one person preaching to the other person? So I think I just yeah. So anyway, to answer the question, I try to focus on dialogue the most.
Okay. Um, about 5 seconds after I asked you that question and you started answering, I realized I asked the wrong question, but I'm going to keep all that in
All right.
because it was a good question. I
Right.
already asked that one on a previous episode, but that I can keep that in because that was a good answer. The question I was supposed to ask was, what's your favorite mood to write? Some examples are wump, fluff, dark, twisted, etc., and why. So now you can answer that one, and it'll be the correct question.
All right. Well, depends on my mood, I guess. Like sometimes when I'm really down in the dumps, I want to write something like angsty, but half the time like over the course of writing it, I'm like, I don't like this. It's
Right.
just making me more sad. So I try to
Uh-huh.
write something happier. Like I remember for one of my other things, when I first started writing it, I'm like, all right, this is gonna be kind of dark. And then
Mhm.
like the first chapter was dark, I felt like, and then like 3 chapters later, I'm like doing fluffy, like they're blushing at each other, sitting by a
Yeah.
fireplace, and I'm like, where did this go? So, so I tend to mainly do fluff, but
Okay.
I try other things from time to time. But they all eventually, all roads lead to the same place where I tend to just write fluff.
Yeah. Obsidian, do you have an answer for this?
I feel like you singled me out with this question
Oh, I know what her
because
answer's gonna be.
Oh,
my entire username is literally Obsidiangst. It has the word angst in the username.
Yeah, I already know what her
Like,
answer's gonna be.
that literally is like one of the things that I sometimes introduce myself to people by saying, "Hi, I'm good at making everything worse."
oh my gosh, no! But you
So
make
it's
this podcast
definitely
better.
it's a toss up between angst and wump because sometimes they like get blended together a little too easily in my head. Um but I find that I'm also pretty good at writing fluff, which just baffles me a little bit cuz
Right.
I do not understand relationships like at all. um but yeah, it's angst.
All right.
100%.
Yeah, all of me writing fluff is guesswork, like both of you have said, where it's like people really, because I've been in one relationship in my life, and even that one is just like it didn't go that far. So then every time I write any scenes where they're romantic, I'm just like, I've seen this in TV shows, I guess. But I guess what I most often lean towards is angst. If anyone's read any of my works, it always ends up angsty. Like someone will request something fluffy, and then I'll go to write it, and I'm like, "Well, what about the angst though?"
We're
And so
all
then I'll be
sad
like,
children
"I know
here.
you requested something fluffy. It got a little angsty, but you asked me for a one shot, so I don't know what else you wanted." I kind of feel horrible sometimes, but then it ends up really good because it's angsty. So that's how it goes.
Again, we're all
Okay.
sad children here.
Yeah, we're all,
Of
it's
course.
how I cope.
Yeah.
Um, I have one more question for you. No one's home, and I know you talked about it a little bit before, but maybe elaborate as much as you can about what you're currently working on.
Okay. Well, I'm working on Silent Ranger and a Curious Princess. It's basically like a AU that's just a whole or as original as I can be, which isn't that original. I'm just stealing a bunch of stuff from assorted fantasy settings and then jamming them all together.
Here,
Um,
here's what I'm gonna tell you. Nothing is original.
of course.
Everything is stolen from someone else. So don't feel bad about it.
Yeah, it's probably it's not probably, it is 100% the longest thing I've ever written.
Wow.
I don't know how, I think it's like, I'm just gonna lowball it and say 30,000 words as of right now.
That's a good chunk, yeah.
Um, yeah, I think it's 17 chapters right now. Um, it's basically just uh, I basically just stole Zelda from Breath of the Wild and just had her be like a awkward, a very awkward person who can't really interact, who really has no like social skills whatsoever. And
So you made Zelda into me, okay.
yeah, or me, you know.
And also you.
Um,
I didn't want to
um,
offend anyone, so I was like, okay, that's definitely
oh
me.
no, it's fine. Um, like, do you want me to just give like a brief overview or like what I'm doing with it?
As much as you want to
All right.
say, I mean, I understand definitely not wanting to like say everything, but as much as you want to say to kind of tease the audience a little bit, like,
Okay.
and get them excited for
I
it.
just
Oh, this
pulled
is
it up
my
on
plug.
AO3. You're at 46,000 words.
Oh, thank you. I said I lowballed it. I don't look at it.
Oh, is some of it already posted?
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
already
Okay.
there's
posted.
17 chapters.
Yeah. Looking back, I shouldn't have posted it. I should have just written it because
Oh,
No, like I mean, not that I shouldn't have posted it. I mean, like I should have
Listen,
written it all at one
you said
time.
that it wasn't original, and I wanted to come through the computer a little bit and fight, because I remember the first time that you and I had ever actually interacted, like in DMs, was because I was helping you with a map.
Oh yeah,
You made a map for
I was
this,
Made a
bored.
map.
okay?
I've never done
That's
that.
dedication
I
to
was
your
bored.
craft right there.
Well, I was bored, and I also like I
That's the
needed a
reasoning for most
visual.
fanfic. I was bored.
I needed yeah, pretty much. I needed a visual of like, because it's basically the whole first like half of the story is gonna be a road trip where Link is trying to get Zelda back to her home, pretty much, and I needed like a visual of the basic geography so I didn't repeat myself or because I'm writing it as I go, which I think I may have already repeated my like made some stuff redundant, changed some names here and there, but oh well. Um, that's basically what the map was for. It was for me, and then I'm like, I can make this. Why not? I'll make it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So it's basically just Blink is sort of he's a ranger in basically Farron, however you, again, I've never said any of these words aloud, so I'm gonna
Yeah.
mispronounce them. The woods, it's Farron Woods,
Mhm.
which is basically a big. It's called the Frontier, so they just have the ranger that patrols the area and all that stuff. And Zelda and her dad visit his ranger outpost, and then stuff goes down, and he has to escort her back home during a war, pretty much. And they get into some shenanigans along the way.
Mhm.
And then when they finally do get there, I'm gonna have to pull out my I'm just gonna steal stuff from Game of Thrones. That's basically the plan.
Okay.
So I mean, I hope it's gonna be good.
An
I'm sure.
excellent plan, by the way.
What?
I mean, Game of Thrones was popular for a reason, so
Well, yeah, up until the
Yeah.
end. So I'm gonna try to avoid that. But yeah, I
we don't
mean,
we don't talk about season 8 of Game of Thrones.
no, we don't. I'm gonna yeah, and Link's a mute in this.
Okay.
Like he like can't talk. It's not like he chooses to. It's he can't.
Hmm.
So in Zelda, and since I part of the reason why I wanted just Breath of the Wild Zelda, who was the smart. Well, they're all very smart. I just like the little
Yeah.
um, geeky side where she would probably know how to speak sign language because she researched it because she was bored.
Yes.
So, so they speak in sign, and I'm just realizing how that probably wasn't a good idea because I keep forgetting that Link needs both his hands to talk, so I can't have
Yeah.
him like try to comfort her with one hand and then talk with the other because that's not really possible to do with a lot of signs.
Hmm.
So I'm regretting it, but I'm gonna roll with it.
Yeah.
I hope that wasn't too long of me rambling about this story.
No, that was great. Like some people come on this podcast and they I'm not naming any names, but they like their answers are a little bit too short, and I'm like, but you could talk more. We love you. But you're
Like,
talking great.
yeah, well, again, this is the first time these have been out loud, so
Yeah.
like there is no stopping them. Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit scared of writing it because when I first started, I didn't have anyone beta reading for me, or and I had like no expectations of where I was gonna go, and now I have two wonderful beta readers that are the best. I love both of you so much. You make my writing 10 times better. I don't know how the hell I posted all this stuff without you. Um, and and now I kind of have a feeling of I have like again like 20 bookmarks or whatever I think on it, and that's a lot for me,
That's great.
and a lot of hits on it and kudos, and I'm like, oh god,
Yeah. You've made it.
I don't want to let anyone down with this
No,
story.
you won't. Don't worry about it.
So
Listen,
Again.
no one's getting paid here, so it's okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Oh,
I mean, it does matter, but like it
complains about
also
your fic,
doesn't.
remind them you're not getting paid to do it. Like it's a passion project.
Yeah. Well, even then, even if someone like rips it in the comments, I'm fine with it. Like, I used to always put in my descriptions like, and I'm always happy for criticism, whether constructive or not. I'm fine with it because the best part is that whatever they have said, I've thought of 10 times as worse in my head about the writing. So it's whatever to me.
Okay.
So
Well,
if you ever want to rip it, go for it.
oh no, I'm not going to. But we are reaching the end.
All right.
Is there anything else you'd like to say, No One's Home or Obsidian?
I would like to add that if anyone does rip on him a little bit, this is kind of like sarcastic, but there is an angry pack of aggressively positive wolves at his back. So maybe don't.
There you go.
We'll have to fight online about it.
All right.
I appreciate it.
That's the place to fight. Until then, though, I'm going to end this podcast. Thank you
right.
for listening.
Thanks for having me on.
Bye.
God, bot!